My name is Len Mazur. I'm the Stewardship Specialist at Sonoma County Regional Parks. I thought maybe before we dive into it, we'll just do some introductions. Yeah.
I'm Jan Lochner. I'm the Invasive Plant Chair for the Milo Baker chapter. And I am thrilled that I have a co-chair.
Hi, my name is Alynn Kjeldsen and I'm the co-chair.
Great. Well, it's really lovely to be here tonight. I really appreciate being invited to present on this topic. And I'm also really excited to be able to present with Jan and Alynn, who have been like vital partners in this project for at least, what, 6-8 years running. So 8 years. Yeah. It's been quite a lot of time out in the sun, out at Doran, and it's exciting that we can all be here together presenting on this topic. I think it's great. So before we jump into it, I'm curious, maybe this won't work for the folks on Zoom, but maybe a show of hands, who's been to Doran Regional Park? Nice. So pretty much the entire room. That's awesome. And then maybe another show of hands, who's actually gone out and volunteered with Jan and Alynn on pulling ice plants. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for the work that you're all doing out there. I'm seeing Paul M. raise his hand. That's great. Extra hand in the mix. Yeah, so I'm just really thankful to everyone who's come out, and whether it's for one day or for 8 years running, like super appreciative. The work that you all are doing out there at Doran is just absolutely spectacular. And I think, we're really indebted to that. So the title of this presentation is Fostering Grassroots Restoration of Natural Disturbance Regimes, which is kind of wordy, but basically what we'll be presenting on is an overview of the natural and unnatural history, ecology, and restoration of Doran Regional Park. Let's see, get this thing working. Just going to go over kind of the different topics that we're going to hit today. So basically, I'm going to give an overview. Can everybody see okay? Yeah. Let's see some pictures here. Sorry, we're hitting some lights here, folks on Zoom. All right. And this photo is a little dark. So, but yeah, we'll be talking about Sonoma County's dune ecosystems, past and present, a little bit of dune dynamics, nothing too crazy. Dune plant constituents, so the who's who of who's in the dunes. Western snowy plovers, existing and emergent threats. The invasive species removal efforts and some of the restoration efforts as well, and kind of where we are during 2025 today. So dune ecosystems in Sonoma County are actually a relatively small proportion of the county's total area. I didn't actually do the math on this, but they represent less than 1% of the county's total land area. And if you're familiar with Bodega Bay, we're pretty much looking at the majority of what could be considered true dune habitat in the county. So you'll see here, Doran Beach. Okay, Doran Beach here. This dune system, which is all part of Bodega Dunes State Park, but is sometimes called Old Dune. Bodega Dunes State Park proper, which you can access off of Highway 1, and then Salmon Creek State Park, which has some bit of dune ecosystem. And then not pictured here, of course, is Gualala Regional Park, which has a small kind of nascent dune system that's more similar to what you might see at Doran. But this is pretty much it. Dune ecosystems are fairly common in coastal California, but most of our northern shores are fairly rocky. So this really truly is, if we're looking at kind of Sonoma County more myopically, a very, I would say, like a rare ecosystem locally. Oh, yeah. And sorry, I will point out, if you're familiar with the topographical features out here and you've spent a lot of time in these dunes, you'll actually kind of understand that this entire area is really just one dune that's been kind of segmented by the bay itself and some of the other features, but it's really a continuous system. So this is an aerial overview of Doran today, or last year, I suppose. And you can kind of see, this is our bird's eye view, you can see here we have a Coast Guard base. Our campgrounds are these weird features here. And then essentially this whole area here is mostly covered in European dune grass and ice plant. We have some more facilities out here on the point. And then this feature here is actually a jetty that is maintained as an opening to Bodega Bay. And this is kind of the Doran that we're all familiar with, but Doran actually looked really different about 100 years ago, or less than 100 years ago. So this is an aerial photograph of Doran from 1942. And you can see there have been major changes to the features, both the land features, but also the vegetative features of Doran. So I'll go back and forth just because it's really interesting to compare. So this is really telling, right? This is, again, less than 100 years ago. We can see that this whole edge of the Doran spit has, all of that sand was relocated to this area, mostly to provide a base for the why am I blanking? Coast Guard base that's there. And then you'll also notice this area is almost completely devoid of vegetation. Doran at this time wasn't owned by regional parks. It was, from my understanding, it was a private hunting club. But I don't know too much more about the history beyond that. But we'll do it one more time just to do the comparison because it's really fascinating. So when we're thinking about Doran, you know, we're really thinking about it as kind of like this more open habitat with a lot less vegetation on it than there is today. Of course, there are other things going on at a macro or like a more zoomed out scale in terms of the different dynamics of how the tides are interacting with all of the changes. But yeah, I think for the purposes of this presentation, it's just kind of try to keep this image in mind, I suppose. So this is a bit of like a complicated kind of description of how a traditional dune would be set up. This isn't necessarily exactly what's going on at Doran and in the Bodega Bay area, but I think it's actually really, it's a great kind of pictorial demonstration of like the different processes that are going on here. So it's really important to keep in mind that dune ecosystems are incredibly dynamic. They are constantly shifting, always changing, always under pressure from the wave action that's constantly washing over the beach. We also have prevailing winds that are pushing the sand in certain directions, and those prevail for most of the year, but those winds could shift during different times of the year, and that's how you really get these dune formations to kind of emerge and form, and they're actually essential to the dune ecosystem. Dunes themselves depend on an extremely high level of disturbance in order to establish and maintain themselves. Otherwise, they just kind of erode away. And yeah, another kind of complicated map, but basic or graphic here. But basically, if we're looking at the ocean here, and our beach and our foredunes, and then our back dune areas, you can see these kind of stratifications that are really based on disturbance. The areas along the that are most directly facing the ocean are going to be extremely high disturbance areas. So we see the highest amount of sand mobility, high soil salinity, which is very difficult for plants and animals to deal with. Natural perturbations, which means like kind of stochastic events that can really shift a whole dune or like move things around in very extreme ways. So we see those kind of in the highest or like the most active in these kind of areas that are mostly adjacent to the ocean. But as we move back to the back of the dune, it tends to stabilize. So you'll see more woody vegetation in the back dune. You'll see more established grasses or things that are have deeper root networks or who are plants that are maybe less accustomed to disturbance. And then you'll also see more nutritional availability as well. So plants will drop their leaves, they'll decompose. Certain plants like lupins or things in the Fabaceae family will kind of actually fix nitrogen in the sand, which allows for the formation of soil and for other woody plants to then establish. So this is very natural in dunes, and you can see it in all different scales. Like dunes are super dynamic spatially, temporally, but when you go to dunes across the state or in your region, if you have them, to try to look for these patterns, because they actually are fairly consistent. And it's really interesting to kind of track where you are in the dune based on, you know, what you're seeing around you. I don't know if these are like official terms or not, but these were part of the diagram, and I've heard, you know, there's lots of cool linguistics associated with dune ecosystems. So I wanted to show, again, as I mentioned, those graphics don't necessarily represent exactly what we're seeing out in Bodega Bay. Instead, we're seeing this very interesting kind of maybe bimodal dune system where we have the Pacific Ocean on both sides of this dune. So if we're looking out west from Bodega Dune State Park, Old Dune at the ocean, that's kind of, sorry, I just inverted this image, but say you're standing here looking out at the Pacific Ocean, we're getting our prevailing winds coming from this direction, and it's causing the formation of Old Dune, these massive, massive dunes that are maybe several hundred feet high. And we hit Bodega Bay, which is, you know, part of the dune, only that it's low and inundated. And then we have the Doran Beach system, which is also getting prevailing winds coming from the northwest, which is this direction, but it's getting its wave action, the disturbance coming from the bay on this side as well. So we kind of have these multiple, it's kind of like disturbance on top of disturbance on top of disturbance layered on top of each other, which makes this a super fascinating system, because there are many, many, many different strata that develop in all of those different kind of disturbance overlaps. And again, I just really want to emphasize disturbance is critical to these ecosystems. And Doran and Old Dune and Bodega Bay is getting a lot of that. And if you've been out there in the winter during a heavy rainstorm, you've seen it. So as I was mentioning, and this is kind of the last of these crazy graphs, but again, this is sort of the strata that develop based on the disturbance that that each level of the dune is getting reflects in a vegetation community. So generally, if we're looking at the right side, your right of my left, maybe this area where the ocean is kind of interacting with the beach, we're going to see increasing physical stress, disturbance, and unpredictability. So here you see a lot of annual plants, you know, things that are just like fully evolved to deal with like essentially like a constant level of disturbance. And then as we go back, we see more stable plants, maybe more woody species, shrubs, trees, things of that nature. And then of course, there's these intermediary zones. So I thought this was a really nice graph that kind of demonstrates that if we were to do kind of a cross section of the dune. And again, next time you're out at Doran or any dune, I really encourage you to look for these, because these can happen at different scales. Like it can be spanning across a few hundred feet, or it can be spanning across a quarter mile, you know, depending on where you're at. Okay. So again, just talking about the way that different plants, so these are extremely dynamic, extremely transient, extremely disturbance adapted ecosystems. And what's most fascinating about that, to me, at least as somebody who's been trained in field botany, is that plants have found multiple different ways to adapt to this like ever-changing, ever-shifting environment. And I thought I would highlight some of those because you can find all of this at Doran. It's really cool. So one type is this kind of dune mat, where it's a low-growing shrub that will trap fine silts and clays and hold water better than sand. They tend to have rigid stems, thick leaves, erect leaf structure. So you'll see in the sand verbena that the leaves are kind of sticking straight up. Winged fruit, which, yeah, they can blow around in the wind or get, they kind of look like little boats, like the water will pick them up and just take a whole bunch of them down the beach with them. It's really cool. Or if you go out on a windy day, you'll see all these seeds from the verbenas just tumbling down the beach. Succulent tissues that help store salt. And then this interesting, effect, which they term sand armor, which is essentially kind of like a stickiness like component to the leaves that traps sand on it, and it reduces predation, but it can also reduce like things chewing on it, but it can also reduce like the transpiration effects of being in a really harsh and like super exposed environment. Some of these have a deep taproot and shallow nodal roots. So this is really key for the sand verbenas, but lots of other plants that you find out there do that. Basically, the way this plant works, and you might have seen this while you're out there, is you'll have a sand verbena mound and some storm will come in, or we'll get a high tide and it washes sand over that plant. And you're looking at the plant and you're like, oh no, it's buried under there. Like, do I help it? Do I have to intervene? But essentially that plant is evolved in order to adjust to that. So it then in the spring will emerge from the mound, sending out shallow nodal roots, re-anchoring into the sand, and then it basically strengthens its structure so that it generates this mound, and it almost requires being buried by sand in order to build these mounds. And sometimes you'll come across these mounds that are 1 to 2 feet tall, and you can tell they've just been constantly washed over year after year, and they're continually adjusting to that. So really cool adaptation. Verbenas do it, the abronias, but you'll see other plants kind of doing this as well. So keep an eye out for those mounds, and that's what's going on. It looks like a little feeble plant on the surface, but really there's a super strong root network going on just below the sand. This other thing, which I termed cabling, that's made up. I made that up, but you might know this as stolons, which are above ground stems. And this is a really cool, so I took these photos at Doran like last week, and this is really cool. So the dune strawberry, Fragaria chiloensis, will basically clone itself along stems. And every time it sends out a stolon, it creates a little root node, anchors itself in, generates a new plant, and then just continues along down the way. And some of these old growth mats are just so impressive. Like you can tell they've just been there for ages, and they're effectively creating like a massive natural jute net that's just anchoring that sand in. And we carved a route through this this part of the dune so we could allow people to walk through without disturbing the dune too much. And this whole thing is just holding on, and it hasn't eroded despite being washed over by huge rainstorms for 2 years. It's had high tide events that have washed over it and extreme winds. And you can just really see the power of a dense interconnected network like this. So I wrote, can stabilize wind and wave sand transport. That's kind of an understatement. It's really like, these are just huge nets just holding these corners of the dune. It's super cool. So this is a plant that you might run into in the spring, again, above ground. So it's this is a Mara species. It's called manroot or wild cucumber. We have several different species of it here, but this is pretty cool. So every once in a while you find one of these that gets dislodged on the beach and you're like, what is this thing? But yeah, so it's this wild cucumber, and essentially over the generations, it creates this massive underground tuber. And it's effectively like an anchor. Like you can imagine just a ship dropping an anchor. It's holding this whole plant in, and it's also holding the dune together as well. The plant itself is kind of viney. It also looks kind of like feeble at the surface, but next time you see this wild cucumber growing out there, just know that there might be this 100-pound tuber just sitting below the surface. Yeah, I wrote literally anchors the plant into the sand. So very, very cool adaptation. And you can imagine, how this is going to act in a super transient system. It's not going anywhere. Super cool. Okay. And then also talking about annual. So these are in that like really high disturbance zone, right? Where the wave action and the wind action are really interacting. Most folks who work in the nursery trade are probably familiar with this term, but scarification, and it's basically a type of like micro disturbance that happens on the seed that allows germination. So it's a process that breaks down the seed's hard outer shell that helps it germinate. Many seeds are impermeable to water and gases, which prevents or delays germination. Scarification makes the seed coat more permeable, which allows water and gases to reach the seed, thus triggering germination. And in dunes, scarification is caused by wind and wave action, and that can affect the seed germination, the growth, and the ultimate survival. So this is the beach sun cup. It's a kind of diminutive little plant that you see out in the dune. And this one is generally an annual, and it you can tell, I didn't look it up, but I know this plant responds to scarification because anytime we shovel around any sand out there, this thing just blows up in those areas. So it's like usually where there's fresh disturbance, anything getting kicked around, this is like the first plant to kind of establish itself. It's really great at colonizing those freshly opened habitats and just jumping on that opportunity, and seed scarification is a huge part of that. Okay, so this is just eye candy, but I just wanted to introduce everyone to, if you haven't seen them, these are some of the plants, native plants, I'm sorry, that you would encounter in a typical local dune ecosystem. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with them. And yeah, the diversity, just the color palettes and the different kind of structural diversity, the types of, pollinators that they might attract, just, there's a lot here, and I've only sampled just kind of maybe some of the most common ones. There's many, many more that you might encounter at Doran and other places nearby. But these are some of the ones you might see if you went out to Doran tomorrow. The sand verbenas, the sea bindweed, the gum plant, which, really isn't too much of a dune plant, but it can get in there if it really wants to. And yeah, these beautiful artemisias that are just like this glaucous-y green color. So the diversity is stunning, and it can be stunning. Oh yeah, I want to show you. So this is a photo I took at Milo Dunes, which is in Humboldt County. This is my friend Jojo here. So you can really see, I mean, I don't know if it's translating that well on the screen, but just the structural and the color palette, the diversity is just like, yeah, it's really remarkable. It's eye candy. It's a really inspiring place. And what do you not see here, right? You're not seeing dune grass. You're not seeing ice plants. So, and look, like the slope of this dune is pretty extreme, and it's held in place, Okay, so another big aspect of Doran is the presence of western snowy plovers. So I know I'm not talking to bird people tonight, but the birds out there are super cool. Doran is really unique. It gets this kind of or like the influence of the Pacific directly on it. So you get a lot of shorebirds foraging in the intertidal kind of washes. And then just on the other side of Doran, we actually have these Bayland like mud flats. And so it's an incredible bird habitat. Western snowy plover is one of many shorebirds out there, but this one is of a particular interest because it's a federally threatened species. Typically, since we've been monitoring, Doran's overwintering flock has been about 30 to 40 birds on average. Many of the birds are banded, and they come from really far away. They overwinter here at Doran, and some of them consistently come back year after year. I think at least one or two individuals are coming from as far away as Oregon even. The birds that use western snowy plovers and the birds that use Doran represent over half of Sonoma County's snowy plover overwintering population. So that's pretty significant. Most of the other ones will hang out around Salmon Creek. And then I think one turned up in Gualala. But for the most part, like these birds are hanging out at Doran. So Doran is critical habitat for these birds, at least locally. In general, so this bird will fit in the palm of your hand. They're very, very small. They're camouflage. You probably, if you've been out there, you probably walked right by 1 or 30 without even realizing it. Their ecology, they forage in kelp racks. So when we have those big storms that dump all the kelp on the beach, a lot of people find it gross. The plovers love it because it brings in all these little sand fleas, all these little flies. That's a big part of their diet. When those are absent, they forage in intertidal mudflats along with the rest of the shorebirds. But they also at when those habitats are not, or like the mudflats aren't available during high tides, they also forage in foredune areas. So those are the places where we have native plants that are established, those verbenas that I was showing earlier. And then we have pollinators like flies and little gnats and things that get drawn in. There's those flowers are extremely fragrant. Plovers have been known to forage amongst, it's not their preferred, foraging habitat, but they have been observed and documented foraging in those areas. And they also roost in foredunes.
Are you protecting the snowy plovers from dogs? Because dogs are lethal, will chase them.
Yeah, we have docents stationed. Oh, so the question is, are we protecting snowy plovers from dogs? And dogs are a huge impact to the snowy plovers out there. It's an issue that we're very aware of, very cognizant of, and we're working with our rangers. We also have a docent program to make more contacts with dog owners. And we also have areas that are now kind of restricted for foot travel in order to, that are favored kind of roosting areas for the snowy plover that are now like kept off limits. So, and then, yeah, lots of community engagement. And as you know, there's, yeah, if you've been to Doran, you've seen it, but we're working on it. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So lots of little plovers in there. This is actually a photo from Doran. So a little bit of our like recent history relating to the plovers is in 2020, for the first time in over 60 years, 2 plover nests were established, but both failed. One was abandoned and one was predated just a few days before hatching. So if everyone remembers 2020, we actually closed down Doran. It really obviously quieted down. The plovers felt more comfortable. They established nests. But ultimately what wound up happening is the nest was right up against a big old patch of dune grass. And the dune grass provides cover for their predators, which, skunks, something else like that. And basically right before the eggs hatch, you can hear the little birds in there peeping. And that's what drew in the skunk, basically the skunks or whatever the predator, we don't know for sure. I don't want to blame the skunk because we don't know, but we're assuming it's a skunk. Basically heard that peeping, used the dune grass as cover and was predated the nest basically by that method. And the snowy plover wasn't able to enact its natural defenses and its way of kind of distracting in order to protect that from happening. So 1 point against dune grass. Okay. So that's not the, dunes are, as I've explained, very complex, very biodiverse, very interesting, but also very sensitive. Like as adapted to disturbance as they are, they're also very sensitive. Dunes face many existing and emergent threats. A lot of those have been long-standing. Dune grass was an ice plant were introduced over 100 years ago. They had a huge impact on dune ecosystems statewide, but now we're seeing massive impacts due to climate change, sea level rise, something I've been learning more about lately, which is the lack of sand replenishment. So there's actually less sand, natural sands coming out of our riparian or river networks. And the natural sand deposits aren't as abundant as they used to be. So dunes are actually actively eroding in many parts of the state. in combination with sea level rise, which is basically, you know, pushing the beach into these really narrow margins right up against our kind of rocky cliffs. Shores, foot trampling or other types of trampling, general public use, recreation, off-highway vehicles, which is a really common use, like in a lot of parts of the state. And then also stabilization. So as I've said many times now, these are dynamic systems. They're dependent on disturbance. Just by stabilizing them, you're effectively taking away those essential processes that the entire ecosystem is dependent on. So part of that is invasive species. Okay, so which brings us to restoration. So there's a lot going on at Doran. We've talked a lot about restoring Doran, but how do we restore Doran? And has it been done before? And luckily, it has. In fact, successful restoration of dune and beach ecosystems has been attempted by many organizations statewide, many that are much bigger than us, and with a lot of success. So we see the restoration projects that I was initially introduced to were up in Humboldt County when I was living there, living and working up there. So Tolowa Dunes, Prairie Creek Redwood State Park, the Gold Bluffs Beach area, Malel Dunes is on here. I also learned about some really fantastic kind of grassroots dune restoration down at Moss Landing in Santa Cruz. I've talked to Lorraine Parsons at Point Reyes National Seashore, who's working on some massive scale dune restoration projects, just like absolutely impressive work. So the good news is folks are trying this, and we have a great template in which they've done all the hard work. So reviewed a lot of these documents. Oh, I'm sorry. Reviewed these documents and been really, and learned a lot from them, basically. So that's all just kind of a setup to say there's a lot of great information out there. All of this is publicly accessible. You can look it up yourself. All of these reports are available online. If you're really curious about the nitty-gritty of restoration and how it's working for people, I highly encourage you to look through these reports because they're awesome.
Other places closer to home are Prissy Field and Baker Beach on the Presidio.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I actually have, Betty mentioned Baker Beach and the Presidio. So I actually had little cutouts of those plans and I didn't have space for them. So I left them off. But yeah, local, really super local examples you can go check out yourself. And they're beautiful. Okay, I'm setting us up for Jan and Alynn here, but basically I just wanted to introduce our two main hit list invasives. So European dune grass, Ammophila arenaria, which I think the name actually just got changed to Calamagrostis arenaria, but I'm sticking with Ammophila because I'm just going to be like that. And then ice plant, so Carpobrotus. There's actually many species of ice plant, but this is kind of the main one that we're looking at here, Carpobrotus edulis. Just keep it simple. These are the two that we do not like. Basically, they were introduced, as I mentioned, over 100 years ago with the intent of along roadsides and rail networks for stabilizing sand. But basically, these things escape. Like all bad invasives, they with no natural kind of controls, they basically went off to the races and you can see both of these photos are from Doran. So we're looking at European dune grass as far as the eye can see. And this is just like a mat of ice plant with a little bit of dune. It's outcompeted the dune grass, which is that's pretty impressive actually, but little patches of that in there. So these two species effectively reduce sand mobility. They disrupt critical natural processes. They also alter soil conditions, so they can affect water infiltration and nutrient availability in that they actually add more nutrients to the sand, which then allows other woody species, as I was mentioning, to kind of colonize those areas, thus transitioning it out of a purely sand environment into kind of what's more like a shrubland or something like that. So when it says it affects nutrient availability, we're not talking about taking away nutrients. We're actually talking about adding nutrients to what it has evolved to be supposed to be a nutrient poor environment. They obviously outcompete native plants, which reduces native plant diversity. And in some places they destabilize soil. So there's a pretty interesting study that was done at Fort Funston, San Francisco, in which they were showing that the bluffs were collapsing under the weight of the ice plant because they absorb so much water, they become really heavy, and then you can actually see the cliffs eroding. As I mentioned earlier, they impact nesting plovers, they provide cover for predator species, and they also reduce the foraging habitat. And, you know, plovers, they're small, they're tiny little birds. They want to be able to see as far out as they can. And they just can't do that when they're in the dune grass. So they don't go in there. It's effectively a dead zone for plovers, and they don't want to walk on the ice plant either, probably for different reasons, but they just don't like it. And as I mentioned also earlier, these two species in particular, there are other invasives out there at Doran, but these are kind of our focus for today, have had a massive impact on dune ecosystems statewide and actually beyond too. But yeah, you can look at like any of those references that I kind of posted earlier, which I didn't, you know, provide a list for, but they're all targeting these species. So these are, you know, kind of #1 hit list all over the state. So with that, I'd like to hand it off to Jan, pictured here, who is coming after that ice plant, and Alynn.
Thank you. That was really, I learned so much. So you did too. I want to stand because need my energy, my feet on the ground. So what I really liked about the picture before this, and even this one here, can you hear me okay? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Is how there's nothing else there. You see, it's all ice plant. Its capacity to create a monocrop is really phenomenal. And not only that, but hard-eating insects. I mean, there's one native bee that will pollinate the flowers. There's just, nobody lives out there. It's not like we're discovering, well, maybe snails, that's the only thing. It's really impressive when we're out there, how little there is. There's never any buzzing of somebody coming and pollinating or doing anything like that. So, I want to talk about the project primarily at Doran and the power of one, because that's how it started. It started with Dea Frey, and she was a ranger, and she noticed the Point Reyes Bird Beak, and she decided that the ice plant was giving it a hard time, and she started in her off hours pulling it. And she did that for about a year or two, and then she called Uncle and got some CNPS volunteer workday help. That was better, but it wasn't all of it. So then she decided, then Penny decided that she really liked going out, and she was going to just keep going out. And that's about 2016, and that's when I joined CNPS, retired and joined it and became invasive plant chair. And then Penny and I would go out together, and then Judith would go out with us, and then Susan and John would go out with us. And then we kind of got all of the ice plant in the marsh. And so then we decided, well, we'll do the bird path. I mean, we got this thing going, we like coming out here, we'll do the bird path. And in the meantime, John did, and then you demonstrate the bin for me. We had been using tarps. I still remember a volunteer work day where everybody left their tarp full of ice plant and I had to carry it back to the pile. Okay. John, and then we did after the tarps, we did boggins. And then John developed these for us, and I don't know where we'd be without these as a tool. They slide right on the sand. We can kill them. They stack. We can fit 20 of them in our little cars. Yeah, exactly. We dump them. They're invaluable in the restoration work that we're doing. So thank you, John. Right there. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So we worked our way down the harbor side because salt marsh is so endangered. And we kind of, as we were getting to the end, this lady kind of started coming out, and she really knew some stuff and had some great ideas. We tried solarizing ice plant. It didn't work, but it was a good idea. And that lady's Lynn, and she started coming out, and we had maybe what, 7 people at that time on a day, maybe, yeah. And then Lynn came, and Lynn was just like so supportive and so knowledgeable. And before Lynn, there had been the attitude in the regional parks like, oh, what are they making a mess there for, And Len, he saw the light. He knows the story. So bless him and his assistants for coming out and helping us and supporting us. He showed us a couple of places when we finished the harbor side to do. We did that little creek that crosses over. Then we did another spot where California native beach grass grows. And then finally Lynn asked us, oh, will you help me with this grant? It's so exciting. And we did. We pulled the ice plant, we moved some plants out. We actually transplanted some native plants, and I'd say we got at least 70% on those that lived, which was really cool. That's right by the boardwalk. Between the boardwalk and the parking lot is where we had transplanted it. And then they reconfigured the sand dunes, and then we planted starts out there. If you've been out there, you'll notice some of the starts are fantastic. They have a lot of rain and wind, and the dunes haven't really settled and formed. And so you can see like a strawberry plant that still looks square, but its roots go down into the sand. And if you look around some of those plants out there, it's pretty interesting, but they're thriving now. So then about that time, we decided to go out to the Bodega Marine Lab. We thought that would be interesting. And it is, and we go out once a month, out to their prairies. And Lynn and I were talking tonight, I don't know where they'd be without us. We've done about maybe a third to half of the ice plant on their prairies in some of the critical areas in 2 years that we've been there. And yeah, they've got almost all natives out there. It's a beautiful coastal prairie. And then after that, we found a lady who likes to bake. And we asked her if she'd like to bake for us, and she said yes. And so that really added a dimension to our volunteer group. Everybody stopped for break time, and it was a really nice time, and it made us much more cohesive and sweet. And then we started more going down from the boardwalk. We started going on down, and we started getting more into beach grass, the dune grass. I'm sorry, it's European dune grass, California beach grass. The dune grass is a totally different thing than the ice plant. It's a different technique. We had to buy some shovels. In the very beginning, I could hardly convince anybody except for John to pull the dune grass. And now I think, most people at least like it as well, if not better than the ice plant. It's got its own little, moment of satisfaction. And it's lighter in the bins, so when you take it to the piles, I don't know, if you haven't pulled ice plant, you may not realize how much volume it has. But I mean, you can work for 5 minutes and get that thing full, depending on the ice plant and the area you're working. And then you have to haul it all the way. And that's where we have a guy that doesn't like to pull it, but he likes to haul it. And then we call him our Sherpa, and he's in New Zealand right now, and we miss him. So let's see, what else is there? We also, in the meantime, have developed an information sheet. And we have a little take one stand, and we have stands out at Doran, trying to educate people about ice plant and why the flowers are pretty. But what I always say is, if that's all you ever want to see, okay, because you won't see anything else. It's just ice plant. Oh, good, nice pictures up there. Thank you. Oh yeah, at one time, everybody wants to know what we're gonna do. We did put them in the green bins there. There was a lot of Len helped. We would get those bins and take all the piles and put them in. But it's priced both by the volume and the weight, so we like to let them sit for at least a year. And we move the ones that are in visually critical areas, but there are some tucked here and there that you would probably never find, and probably will just rot out. And so we're trying to do a lot of education, especially out at Bodega Head on Sundays, when we're out there once a month. There's a lot of international people, just a lot of education goes on. People are always stopping to talk to us. And I want to at this moment thank Michelle Carly, because she has been a real liaison between regional parks and us in terms of communicating and park passes and all of that. And you will soon see us in these lovely green t-shirts that we're just having printed now. It's kind of like we feel like we're a club, and we get to wear them. Then after a while, we'll offer them up to, to other people. So it's been a great 8-year ride for me. It's added so much meaning and satisfaction and pleasure to my life, as well as smelling better than the gym. So with that,
no, you go ahead, because I got a few more slides after this.
Oh, if you are interested in volunteering and want us to communicate
Do you
with
wanna
you,
just jump
we're gonna
in?
pass this little thing around while Lynn's inspiring you.
Okay.
I know.
Sure. Okay.
That's okay. Just put your name and email.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Alynn will be talking more at the end. So I have this date wrong. This is when I got engaged with the group 2019, but been going on actually a bit longer than that. And as Jen mentioned, originally targeted the Point Reyes Birds Beak, which is I have a photo of it here. And I did a little bit of just kind of mapping today, and they restored approximately 1 mile of bay marsh, like those mudflat areas that had been impacted by the primarily ice plant. And then over the last couple of years, since they moved over to the dune side, have progressed over about a half a mile of dune, which is no small feat. I mean, it's a huge, I mean, as we say in the invasives world, eating the elephant, you know, you do it one bite at a time. And like really every week, it's, if I don't go out there for like a month and I show up, I'm amazed, because they're just like, you know, another several hundred feet down where I left them last. And then about 21 total acres of total improvements. So it's real dedication. And again, I can't say it enough, like, thank you to everyone who's, you know, come out and done a bit of work out there, or a lot of work out there. I hope you're proud of what you've done. It's really just absolutely beautiful. So Jan didn't mention this, but on November 15th, the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors awarded the California Native Plant Society Milo Baker chapter a gold resolution for its 8-year restoration project at Doran Beach.
And that's back there, you can see it.
Yeah. Congratulations. Very exciting. So glad you all are getting that recognition. Okay, I got a few more slides to get through here. So as Jan kind of mentioned, we're coupling, we jumped on an opportunity to couple the removal efforts with a bit of active restoration. So this is outplanting of native species from seeds that were collected on site, from native plants that were collected at Doran, and also, as Jan mentioned, from friends of ours at the Bodega Marine Lab. So really trying to keep it as local as possible. The objectives of this project were to remove target non-native invasive plants from critical habitat areas for western snowy plover, to collect and propagate site-adapted native seed stock in partnership with qualified native plant nurseries. So that was the Laguna Foundation. They actually did the growing out the outplantings, and they came out and did the planting day with us. Outplant native dune species for the benefit of snowy plover foraging habitat. Encourage native seed plant recruitment from existing natural seed banks. So that's one of the beauties of doing restoration in dunes, is they have a suppressed seed bank that once the natural disturbance cycles are reestablished, you actually get a lot of natural seedling recruitment as well. So really great to kind of get a bunch of restoration activity. And then we also installed educational interpretive signage about the importance of native dune plants and dune ecosystems. And there's also a sign that is basically a special thanks to all the volunteers out there. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. Are we doing on time? Like, can I just keep going or? Okay. I have a short YouTube clip that shows the project. I think it's a little bit like promotional from a regional parks perspective, but I think it's valuable to look at. Hopefully this works. Yeah. Oops. I don't know if this sound will work. Maybe I'll just... Oh no, it's... Oh no. Yeah, that's not gonna work, is it? Oh, it's not. Okay. Well, then we'll skip it. If you ever have a chance, or if you have a chance, just take a look at that video.
You put it in the next newsletter.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. This is a video that demonstrates this collaborative effort that, well, let me just go back to the slides here. Sorry. Okay, so essentially we pursued a grant opportunity with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in partnership with the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation and California Native Plant Society, Milo Baker chapter, to basically meet all of these objectives. And because it was really revolved around this grassroots effort involving multiple different partners, we wanted to capture that in video. So we actually got really great documentation of the planting day. Everyone has a really nice feature. Jan's in it, Alynn's in it. And I think it's just like a nice little package that kind of describes like, you know, kind of what's going on out there in terms of the active restoration. So I will get that to folks for later and can send it around. Okay, let me take this. Okay, so where are we now? So Doran 2025, if you were to go out to Doran tomorrow, well, actually maybe wait a few weeks until things start flowering, but so native plants are successfully establishing from the outplantings. As Jan mentioned, they're kind of like the ones that we've actively planted are now rooting out. They're the stolons are emerging. They're kind of establishing their natural kind of features that will effectively kind of generate a dune mat. We also, with my staff, will go out and collect seed in the fall, and then in the winter, we just throw them out in the dunes. And those just natural direct seeding experiments are also working really well to kind of establish and shake things up and get things started in areas where we weren't necessarily just plugging plants in the ground. And then the natural seed bank recruitment. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of disturbance that we've seen in the last few winters that has happened here, like just in terms of rain and windstorms and all those things. And those are actually kind of helping kick things up a bit, get the natural processes moving. And so this photo in the top right corner, or the top corner here, shows like what was once a barren dune just a year ago is now got lots of native plant biodiversity. And you actually see a lot of, I mean, go out there in the spring. It's amazing. There's pollinators everywhere. We got sphinx moths on the sand verbena. Like, look really closely. The place is buzzing. It's super cool. Notable increase in native plant biodiversity and covered. I haven't measured this in any kind of like organized way, but I just know because I go out there all the time. Increase in sensitive species distribution. So the pink sand verbena is actually a 1B1 CNPS ranking or state ranking. So it's a rare plant, and it's naturally, we didn't actually do any outplantings of that, and it's responding very well to the natural disturbance. It's pretty much quadrupled in its size and distribution, or number of individuals and distribution across the landscape in the pooled areas. We conduct ongoing monitoring and retreatment of ice plant and dune grass in the restored areas, both by regional park staff and CNPS volunteers. We do periodic retreatments, which is helping from an early detection rapid response standpoint, maintain the stop the reestablishment, or try to hold back the reestablishment of ice plant dune grass in the areas that have been treated. And then this is really the big news here is the snowy plover, since the implementation of this project, which is 1 year ago, snowy plover numbers have increased to the highest numbers documented at Doran since our monitoring efforts began. So for many years that the numbers at Doran have hovered around 30. Last year they bumped up to 40, and then this year our overwintering counts were 59 birds. So that's a massive increase. And something that we're very excited about. There may or may not be directly related to this little patch of restoration that we're doing. There's a lot of things happening at the state level, but in terms of changes in habitat, like again, these are very transient systems, but regardless, we're very excited that these birds are, choosing to move to Doran and that we have a place available for them, basically. And also snowy plovers have been observed utilizing restored areas as foraging habitat and roosting habitat. So now they're using the dunes in a new way that they weren't before, because as I mentioned earlier, the dune grass was pretty much growing right up to the edge of the beach. Once we pulled that, or once CNPS pulled that dune grass back, now they're roosting right at the base. They feel safer there. So that's huge when you think about these high tide events that are completely washing over the beach. We're essentially creating more refugia for these birds to be able to move into and more safely. Okay.
I didn't know that. That's exciting.
I just got the
That's
news.
thrilling.
Yeah, I didn't tell you yet. Oh, and yeah, you can see here. So this is in the restored area. So this is a plover that is sitting on a mound of sand verbena. I'm sorry, yeah, this is our plover here. This is sand verbena. This is a sand verbena mound that is getting established in the area that's been pulled. So, and this is like, you can see back here, this kind of fuzzy area. There's just like dune grass carcasses back there of just dead dune grass. So yeah. Okay, here's a better photo that shows that. So again, the plovers are really hard to see, but look at this. These are verbena mats. This is verbena. These are those mounds that I was talking about at the beginning. This is all the mostly pulled dune grass area. And this is where they're hanging out now. And this is new behavior. This isn't what they were doing before. So it's pretty cool. This is not from Doran. But this is a photo of hatched plover chicks in a beach sun cup plant. So, whoops, sorry. This kind of shows like they are utilizing native habitats as critical nesting areas. And this is essential for their reproduction and their ongoing survival. So, and this is a small plant. So, every little bit counts, and I think that's really the lesson here. So with that, this is the original sign. I love this sign. I found a photo of this and I was like, this is the best sign. So grassroots effort by California Native Plant Society, Milo Baker chapter. Again, thank you all. Yeah, I guess it's the end of. Oh yeah, sorry, Alynn has more to say about it.
Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up for us. I just wanted to thank everybody for being here, everybody that's on Zoom, everybody that has ever participated in the project, whether it's one day, whether it's every day. We super appreciate all of your work. And for those of you that have not joined us yet, you really you should come out and give it a try. We're a friendly bunch. Everyone is coming from different backgrounds. We have different ages, different experiences. And it's really fun because we all very quickly connect with the shared mission of getting sandy while helping the environment. Another goal is to have a good time, and we do a pretty good job sharing stories, telling jokes, sometimes busting out with a song. Some of us are better at that than others. We welcome all ages, all abilities, no experience necessary, and training is provided. In addition to the tremendous amount of work that we achieve, we also have built a very strong sense of community with our volunteers, often meeting in activities outside of our project. So if you're feeling lonely, come on down. You don't have to feel lonely. So what does the future of volunteerism at Doran Park look like? Well, to Jan and I, the future looks great, and it looks like a future with no ice plant and no dune grass, European dune grass. We believe that with the continued support of our current and future volunteers, that we can eradicate the plant and we can eradicate ice plant and dune grass from the park. I know this might be news to you, Len. The fact that Doran Park is nearly an island will aid in our efforts, and we are certain that this is an achievable goal. It's a big idea, but who wants to dream small? So you ask, how can I help? Well, let me tell you the ways. We have a flyer that's right over by the door, so it would be really great if everyone picked one up. And if you aren't already familiar with our project, it has our project times on the back of it and gives you some information, some more information about ice plants specifically. We have a lot of other ideas. If you are not physically able, you can come and help educate passerbys. People are hungry for information out there. People are constantly stopping us and asking us what we're doing. And the minute we start explaining it to them, they're so happy and so grateful. And it's very heartwarming to have conversations with people about a shared desire to improve your environment. We also welcome help with media, publicity, signage. We're looking for someone to make contacts with local schools and local nonprofits that would want to do group events out there. You could also help us financially. We use tools to work, snacks to recharge us, and flyers to educate, and those all cost money. We especially would like people that would be willing to lead extra work days at Doran or at Bodega Head. We would be happy to facilitate someone to lead a new project along the coast if that interests you. We've talked about moving a project up to Duncan's Landing or to the Carmet or Sereno Del Mar area. If you guys are familiar with those areas, there's a lot of lovely native plant areas that need help from getting out from under the ice plant. Or is there a place inland or somewhere that you feel is super special that you would like to start a project? For example, pulling French broom. Whatever your interest is, if you're ready to roll up your sleeves and get started, Jan and I are here to help you, to support you in whatever capacity we can. So please take a look at the flyer. And if you are on Zoom, you can find the flyer on our Milo Baker webpage. Oh, thank you, Jack. And we are all just super happy that you're here and that you are interested in this project. And please share it with everybody that you know so that we can continue the great work. And thank you so much for adding this sign. I think, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
My daughter did the lettering, I remember. It's society.
Find where you're working.
So we have so I guess I would like to open it up to questions at this point. And so somebody asked if it's easy to find where we are working. It can be. Sometimes it can be, we will be moving back over to the salt marsh side very soon, and we're a little bit more hidden over there. So we do recommend, if it's your first time out, to get a hold of Jan or myself and find out where we are. I see another
Do
question.
you have to go back and worry about things reseeding, invasives coming in, or?
Yeah, I'll take that too. So the question was, do we need to go back and check for reseeding and things resprouting? Yes, we do go back over all of our areas, and inevitably there are roots that we miss or seeds that have germinated. And so it is part of our process to go back over everything that we've covered. Unfortunately, sometimes it's longer than we wish, so there's more there than we expect. But yeah, right now we are working mainly on the dune grass, and that will only be there until March 1st, which is when snowy plover season begins. And at that point in time, we'll be bouncing back over to the salt marsh side, which we have already covered, but we will be sweeping back through it and picking up stuff that was left behind or has resprouted.
Also, the dune grass takes through.
Also, the dune grass, because dune grass is, it grows from rhizomes. A lot of those rhizomes are very deep under the sand. And so when we're pulling that, we're only getting, granted, sometimes a very small bit. So it could be several times over the dune grass that we will be passing over it before we can really get rid of it. Jack.
Have you noticed certain spots after successive going like pulling multiple times? Have they not spread come back as quickly, or have you noticed an area that it hasn't been coming back at all?
Yeah, to summarize the question, is there areas that it doesn't come back or some areas that comes back more? Is it kind of like that? Yeah, so it's tricky. Every single area is different. Every single year is different. I mean, I feel like we've passed through areas multiple times. And for instance, along the salt marsh side, we'll pass over it. The first time is always the hardest. I'll just say that. The first time is where we get the majority of the work done. Like 90% of it is done in that first pass. But then it is absolutely a requirement to go back over things. And so the salt marsh example is, I know that like we passed this area a second time and picked up a little bit here and there. And then the third time we passed over it, all of these little teeny tiny sprouts from the ice plant showed up. And why they showed up at that point in time, I'm not really sure. Typically, possibly scarifying the seed. That could be it. Yeah. So, yeah, we haven't come up with specific patterns of growth, but we are out there on a weekly basis, and I think, do a pretty good job of covering the area that we go through. And also with the help of the county workers, we're able to go over things multiple times.
We also tackled some radish and mustard out there and some fennel.
Yeah, so Jan's also adding that we've taken care of some wild radish and some fennel and other nuisance weeds out there also.
Is there a native grass associated with the coastal area?
There are native grasses, and I'm gonna let Len cover that one.
Wow. Yeah, there's a number of native grasses that are native to dunes. And you'll find them, they're kind of adapted to like kind of different strata in the dunes, like depending on how much disturbance they're getting. But if you go out to Doran, we have an Elemis that grows out there that's rhizomatous, that is native, and you can see it out there. It's actually one of the grasses that, well, we added it to our planting palette for our restoration. But if you're walking around out there and you're seeing a grass in the dunes, that in the area that's been pulled, hopefully that's the native Elemis grass. So you can find it that way.
It's kind of a darker green.
The dune where we saw the clovers by the plants, and there were grasses back in there. Those are the native grasses?
No, unfortunately, those were the resprouting Ammophila plants, but there are at Doran, you can find really nice patches of the native grass in the dunes in areas that CNPS has removed either ice plant or the Ammophila or the European dune grass.
Because you have replanted them or they have reseeded?
Both. So they spread primarily rhizomatously through underground stems. In some of the areas they're naturally occurring, and that they were suppressed by the ice plant and stuff. And once they pulled it, it just exploded. I mean, it came up everywhere. It was just waiting for that. In other places, we took cuttings propagated them out in a nursery and then relocated them into some areas of the dunes as part of our restoration efforts as well. Sorry, I didn't paraphrase that question, but the question was, are there any native grasses present in the dunes? For the folks on Zoom. Any other questions? We're kind of wrapping up here. Okay, thanks everyone.